So, good morning. We are in a voting work session. And I'm happy to hear Senator Edwards would like to hear something about 847. Sure, of course.
All right, Senate Bill 847. I do not have any amendments for you, none are presented. What this does is for libraries, for their capital projects, and I believe the testimony is similar to school construction. The changes are on the last page of the bill. Basically saying that if the county's household income is in the bottom quartile of the state, but that the state share for a county capital library project is 50%, then the local share will be reduced, basically adjusted, reducing the local share for those counties that meet those income criteria while also increasing the state share at the same amount, just kind of shifting the share between that for purposes of county library projects.
Did you understand that? I need another cup of coffee, I think, so I didn't. Could you do that one more time, Eric? I apologize.
Sure, that's okay. So the bill, right now for county library projects, there's a state local share, just
Yep.
like with any other things.
Yep.
This one says that if a county meets certain income criteria, namely that their median household income is in the bottom quartile in the state, that then their local share can be reduced and the state share be increased.
I see. And what's the overall cost to the state?
So the fiscal note indicates none, because right now, well, in statute, the capital projects for libraries get 7.5 million annually, so it would just redistribute that funding within the 7.5.
Gotcha. Senator Edwards?
It just makes it the same with what we passed 2 years ago for school construction, puts it in the same category, because right now it's the same formula originally as school construction, just makes this the same now as school construction, which we passed 2 years ago. Doesn't cost the state any more money. Still up to the State Board of Libraries who gets what, because they have to apply through them. They get the same amount of money, I think it's 7.5 million. We raised it from 5 a couple years ago.
Any other thoughts, comments? Okay. Senator McRae?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't see an impact to Baltimore City. It looked like it's only one jurisdiction that this truly impacts, but just want to understand, is there ramifications going forward 3-5 years from now? And
It's a statewide bill, so it could change if you fall into the bottom quintile and you have a 50-50. Baltimore City doesn't have a 50-50.
okay.
But if you ultimately would fit in that category, and you were in the bottom quintile, or whatever, how you pronounce it, you would fit in it. So it's a rotating kind of thing.
Senator Griffin?
Thank you. Yeah, so if I understand it correctly, basically it just means that your match would change, therefore you might draw a different amount from the fund if you had a project in that year and fell into the bottom 25%, correct?
Right, and everybody doesn't have a project every year.
Correct.
It still has to be approved with a state board.
Understood.
They approve
Correct.
which project gets funded.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, Senator Edwards,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
you're our first winner for the day. And then there's a guy who wins every day, 862. Oh, well, I don't know who's, is that yours?
I'm just handing these out.
Okay.
Your prints are on your desk, Senate Bill 862. It expands the transit services that The Maryland Transit Administration is required to provide in Baltimore City. For the last 4 years, I believe it is, the Transit Administration has been providing bus services to Baltimore City public school students. That requirement actually terminated in fiscal '21, and so there's been some question about whether the Transit Administration was going to start charging the Baltimore City public school system for the services that they were providing. This bill would put into law that requirement that they continue providing those services going forward. The law would terminate in 5 years, so there would be a chance to reevaluate it. And so it just puts that practice in place where the Transit Administration is going to continue providing those services. The Baltimore City delegation, I understand, passed an amendment to the bill that would expand this to include youth workers in the Baltimore City Youth Works program, and they would then receive similar transit passes and be able to take advantage or be treated as though they were students for purposes of using the transit system there in Baltimore City.
Spot on. First, Baltimore City is very unique than other jurisdictions. We don't have cheese buses. We catch the MTA bus. The second, yeah, so like the yellow buses that, yeah.
That's the first time I've heard that too. Yeah,
Y'all never heard it?
yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe it's because we were different. Is why we call it. So we're very unique. Our young people catch it. This has been going on since I've been a student. There was some contention back in 2017 where MTA, as Matt had talked about, I believe it was Senator Oak's bill, where we just said, hey, we're going to put this in statute, that sunset. At that time, the sunset left us a year ago, so we're continuing a practice that's already there. If you look at MTA's testimony, they basically said that they didn't have a problem with this because they're already doing this, and even during the sunset, that it wasn't an issue. We have a program called Youth Works. It's not scaled up to the space that it was at this in previous years because of COVID, but MTA has always paid for 50%. MOED reached out and said, hey, can we piggyback onto the school bus bill? And then the other piece of the amendment was where we changed the name, I believe, from Charm Card to Transit Pass. That way, the name has changed since 2017, but that way it would be more uniform. So those were the two Baltimore City delegation amendments. And I thought that everybody knew our lingo in Baltimore.
Senator Jackson.
Thank you. Senator McCray, just also take care of the extracurricular activities from the schools for the youth as well.
So Senator Jackson asked about the extracurriculum. So our bus passes run till 8 p.m. This makes sure that if you're at football practice, if you're at basketball practice, that the young people still will be able to get home in a timely manner. So yes, it does have an hours restriction, and that hour restriction is that they can catch it until 8 p.m.
Cool. Yeah, most of the major cities do that.
Yep.
That's cool. Thanks.
Very good. Senator Eckert.
Thank you very much. Is this the only form of school bus transportation?
So unless they are like disabled or going to a special school, this is our primary use of transportation for our young people. So typically, we have to find transportation for everybody. So
Right.
those folks that meet certain challenges or different special qualities, sometimes they catch the cab, sometimes they catch other bus. I won't say the other bus, but sometimes they catch other buses. But this is the primary use of transportation for our young people.
And that's from the Transportation Trust Fund, correct?
It's from the MTA, which is from the Transportation Trust Fund, yes, ma'am.
Correct. And does the Transportation Trust Fund fund all school transportation?
No.
Across the state? No.
So what do other jurisdictions do? Fund their own?
I believe some jurisdictions have a contractual bus service that they provide, and some own the buses. I'm not completely familiar with how local school systems provide that service.
Right, so does Baltimore City put in, is it a shared amount with the Transportation Trust Fund for school bus. I'm just trying to get my head around, our lower income districts are funding it themselves. And is this,
I think that the ones that meet challenges, wherever they have certain disabilities, obviously the school system has to step in to make sure that those young folks can get there, but the primary source of transportation, no, they don't. They coordinate in reference to the routes. The MTA actually showed up at our school, so since when I was going to school, they had a special route specifically for schools during that time. Most high schools had them, and most middle schools had them. As they've transitioned into more charter schools, so you don't see the buses going to the charter schools, but our traditional schools always had the MTA come, and that's been since I've known it for the last 20, 30 years.
thank you very much. That's interesting. I didn't realize, I just thought all jurisdictions handled funding of school bus transportation
Right.
in a similar way. Thank you.
So I
Thank
think
you,
it's
Mr. Chair.
interesting that it lapsed, what, in 21?
Yes, it lapsed in 21.
And they've
but
still been doing it.
MTA has continued doing it. I think something happened between MTA and the school system this year that caused some doubt as to whether they were going to continue providing the service. I think MTA has always provided the service. The issue is really whether they're back charging the school system for the service that they're providing. That's my understanding.
2017 was a very, very contentious year, so it's always been done. We codified it in statute in 2017 because of some of the interesting conversations that was going on with MTA. If you look at the testimony that's within our computer screens, Holly Arner, the administrator, said, hey, this shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, Senator Edwards?
Yeah, elaborate on the Center for East Shore. There is a line item in the education funding for transportation that all subdivisions get, except I'm not sure how it works in Baltimore City. Whether you have contract buses or you own them, you get a certain amount through some formula. And if you need more, then the locals have to put in the difference, my understanding.
Senator Elfreth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. School buses have been the most politically contentious issue in my district for the last year because we've run out of drivers. And it has a lot to do with the pandemic. Amazon's paying $10,000 signing bonuses. It's a nightmare, and to expect any jurisdiction to kind of pick that up from scratch is going to be, it's just not going to work at this time. The buses are already running, and kids are just catching those buses that are already running, and to me, it makes a tremendous amount of sense. We tried to even do something similar in the city of Annapolis when our school buses weren't running, and even to this day, about 50 routes are down a day. So I think this is the absolute right thing to do, particularly at a time when we're missing a lot of drivers across the state.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Winner. All right, we're gonna pull up, I don't think it's on the list, but I think it got missed, 831. Somebody have that? Sorry. After that, we're going to try to do some of the bills from the procurement work group. Oh, that one too, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Which one is that? 709. Yeah, that's a good one. All right, who's got 709? Okay, let's do that while we're waiting.
Senate Bill 709, you previously discussed this. The bill would set up a fund for post-traumatic stress disorder and, as amended, traumatic brain injury therapies to provide grant funding and then also funding to provide services for alternative therapies for post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injuries for veterans.
So does this give money so that, to get people into experimental center?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and there were, just to answer some of the questions that we all discussed the last time around, Hopkins, University of Maryland, Shepherd Pratt are all in the middle of these trials right now with great success. You heard from the doctor from Hopkins during the testimony. But they're Schedule I drugs. The VA, it's our understanding the VA is not going to engage in this kind of therapy anytime soon, and we do have a crisis on our hands. 22 veterans a day are committing suicide. This is proven to work. We checked with the doctor in his testimony. He said the greatest barrier to access is just the cost of getting someone into these trials. It was about $30,000 a person to get into this trial, but it, as he mentioned, it has great success. I realize it's kind of an unorthodox approach to the situation, but we're also in crisis mode in terms of surveying our veterans with traumatic brain injuries and PTSD.
And what's the fiscal note?
It's just 1 million for 1 year and then report back and see how it goes.
Okay. Senator?
I think my question last time was, why is the state funding this instead of NIH? It seems like a perfect NIH thing. Did you find out?
I don't know what NIH is doing. We did check, VA is not gonna do it because it's Schedule I. I'm not sure NIH has the same policy priorities we do of supporting veterans. I just don't know if that's in their wheelhouse.
Well, it just seems like it's national research.
No, I totally agree. This is an unorthodox bill, but I think we have an unorthodox problem on our hands.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Corrigan?
Is this the one with like the psychedelics,
Yeah.
like MDMA and all that stuff?
Psilocybin.
Yeah, and then you talked about the trials are ongoing right
Mm-hmm.
now. When is that process supposed to be completed?
Completed? I don't know, but I can get an answer.
Okay.
So finance is second on this.
I'll tell you about that in a second.
What's that?
And for what it's worth, this bill has been assessed by the Veterans Caucus, so for whatever it's worth, we're supporting the bill.
The Veterans Caucus, okay. Senator Salling?
This is something that, as the good senator says, has been a problem for a long time. I think some of the things that they have done, the biggest problem is exactly this, the funding, as we know. And I think doing something like this, just to give $1 million to find out how we can improve people's lives of what they've gone through, I think this is just a step forward of something that we need to do. But I think it's a whole lot more after we find out the good alternatives that are gonna be and gonna happen. It's gonna be something that's gonna work, that we're gonna be helping out a lot of veterans and maybe other people that have the same kind of problem. So if I could, I'd like to move favorable on this bill.
Okay. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Senator Corbett.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Okay.
that was with the amendments?
What's that?
With the amendments?
With the amendments.
The amendments, just, it was requested that we add traumatic brain injury in addition to PTSD. And a stakeholder wanted to be added to the kind of group that's deciding how the money should be distributed.
Yeah, Brain Futures.
Yeah.
Okay. With the amendments, all those in favor? Opposed? Senator Corbett couldn't be persuaded with that amendment.
We can carry it to the floor.
Senator Corman should carry it, the vice chair suggests. All right, who has the work group on procurement?
Philip.
Yep.
Okay, what do we got coming out of there? Are they on the list already?
They should be on the list, 240, 542, and 507.
Okay,
Or
okay, so
250.
Let's start with 250.
250.
What do we got?
Let me just send finance a
What?
message about that last bill. Okay, Senate Bill 250, as introduced, would have reduced the time period for processing payment on procurement from 30 days down to 15, and also made adjustments to the processes for submitting for interest payments. The work group, you should have a reprint on your desk, The work group had met with some various stakeholders, including some of the agencies and the comptroller's office involved in the processing of these, and decided to leave the current 30-day window alone, given that there's a lot of issues with the systems that are being used to process the payments. However, the work group decided to, with respect to interest, the way interest currently works is it begins accruing on the 31st day after a payment has not been made, but there's a 15-day grace period. So if the payment is then processed by that 45th day, there's no interest. The work group is eliminating that grace period. So interest would begin accruing after 30 days and would also be payable after 30 days. The amendments do, however, leave the process in where you still have to invoice for the interest. The bill is introduced was repealing that, but that's staying in. And then a couple studies.
Sorry, Philip, I didn't hear that. Just repeat that last item.
The bill is introduced, struck requirements that you have to submit an invoice for the interest. The amendments leave that in, so that, given the issues with the systems and all that, it's still requiring that invoicing, so there's
Thank you.
Notice and record of that process. The work group added 2 studies. The first is a study by DLS to basically gather some information from the various entities engaged in procurement to evaluate what the payment timelines currently are. I think with the idea to get a little more information about the needs of all the agencies in terms of looking at reducing that 30-day payment period so that vendors can get paid quicker. And then the work group also added some language requiring reporting about the upgrades to the state's financial management information system. One of the things the work group found was that the systems we use are a big burden in terms of how procurements are processed, and that it's largely a paper process. And so the work group wanted to, especially given that there's going to be a turnover in the administration and the comptroller's office, to ensure that that process, which began back in February, continues on, and also reports about targets and plans for that process moving forward, as well as setting goals to move towards an electronic process that significantly reduces the timeline for getting payments processed to vendors.
Thank you, Philip, and thanks for your work on this, and thanks to Senator McCray and Senator Corderman and Senator Griffith for the work on this. Big picture is, the good news is that the executive agencies understand there's a big problem, and they understand it requires a big solution, which is massively upgrading and digitizing the process of managing their procurements and their payment system. The bad news is they've just started. They're kind of at the vision level of it. They got a group that's working on it. My impression is they're real serious about it. It will take a couple of years for them to do it. So that's why the language in the 2 studies is to say, A, we want reports back on how it's going, so we keep on top of it. And we indicate to them that we're really serious about this. Secondly, have DLS actually crunch numbers, because the department didn't really have numbers about how slow, how many invoices were being processed. So we want to get that data to keep the pressure on. And then in the meantime, because we think moving from the 30 days to the 15-day payment is just not possible, given how antiquated the systems are, that at least the interest that is owed on late bills should be paid from 30 days instead of 45 days. So it's kind of a short-term, little bit of Band-Aid, long-term, really focus and be supportive of overhauling the system to solve it the way it really needs to be solved. That's essentially what we did.
Okay. All those in favor of the bill?
Aye.
Opposed?
And one other thing to point out, the change with regard to interest payments is delayed until June 1, 2023, in the bill as, in the amendments currently before you.
And that's because that's what the House did, but we can change that.
Okay. Did you already send notice over to Finance that we passed 709?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Is there another one?
There are a few others, yes.
Okay.
So, did you vote?
Yes, Tim.
Did you vote 250?
Yeah, we just voted
Okay.
250. That's what I thought we just did.
Okay, sorry. 542 is the next, or, yeah, let's do 542 next.
542.
That's what we don't have on this, right?
No, it's on there,
You should have,
second page,
should be on the list, I think. Yeah, I think we added it.
page 2 at the bottom.
I got it. That's completely full.
Yeah. You should also have a reprint on your desk. This bill, as introduced, the concept was to apply interest on late payments for grants. So currently, the interest payments only apply to procurement contracts. The idea here was that when grant payments are delayed, there's an impact on the grantees, and so the idea was to have the same process for interest payments that apply to contracts, also apply to grants. Given what the work group did with the last bill on interest payments, they conformed the process for grants in Senate Bill 542 to that same process whereby interest would become due after 30 days and also payable after 30 days. The one difference is that on page 2 of your reprint, in the definition of grant, the work group also added a clause making this prospective, so this would apply to any grant executed on or after October 1, 2022, since this is a new process as opposed to modifying something that was an existing process for the contracts and procurement. The sponsor also had submitted amendments. You'll see these on page 3 of the reprint. That's just clarifying the list of exempt entities for this. And then the other change, you'll see on page 4 of the reprint, there was testimony submitted that expressing concern that for some grants, the source of the grant funds may not be authorized to pay interest payments. And then there was also concern raised that if you're allowing interest to be paid, that it could effectively reduce the amount of grant funds that are able to be dispersed. And so this language clarifies that with respect to the interest, it's the entity, the grant-making entity is liable, and the interest should be paid from their operating funds as opposed to any funds that were designated to be used for the grants. And then this bill would take effect October 1st, 2022.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, Philip, let me ask you one other question. I thought this bill also put the 30-day requirement on the grants. I thought they didn't have a 30-day payment requirement on grants.
Yes, sorry, yes.
It does that too?
Yes,
Yeah.
it conforms grants to the same timelines.
There are a few little twists and turns, but the big picture is, we didn't have any requirements for when you had to pay on grants. We had them for vendors, but not for grants, and so this basically puts grants in more or less the same posture as vendors, which seems perfectly reasonable, and Philip laid out some of the twists and turns.
Very good. All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And I'm thinking it's 507, right?
507 is the last one, yes. As introduced, this bill would have required contract modification clauses when the price of materials increased due to certain events. You have some amendments here, we're talking with Senator Roosevelt and Senator Salling, that are modeled after a federal process, which allows for, it more clearly spells out the process for making contract modifications regarding the increase or decrease in cost of materials. And you'll see that process outlined beginning on the bottom of page 3. So generally, it requires notice by the contractor.
507.
507. Generally requires notice by the contractor to the procurement officer within 60 days if the unit prices for material either increase or decrease. And then there are constraints over when those increase and decrease modifications would occur. There's a 3% limit on price fluctuation before it would apply, and then there's a limitation that you'll see outlined in paragraph 4. Sorry, the pages aren't numbered because we're adding, but it should be the last page of full text you're seeing. Down towards the bottom, there's a list of instances when adjustments may not be made. The most significant is that an adjustment may not exceed 10% of the original unit price. The testimony submitted, there was testimony submitted concerning whether if the bill is introduced was shifting the risk solely on the state. Under the amendments, it's relevant to increases or decreases, so the state does have some participation in the upside of the risk changes.
Senator Solly?
And in this posture, this is how those that testified wanted it this way. They wanted to make sure that we did go by these guidelines, so, thank you.
Senator Rosenberg?
Yeah, but Senator Sally is exactly correct. As the bill came in, it was drafted in a way that put all the risk on the state, and that's why a lot of us didn't think it made any sense. So I got with Senator Sallings, and I got with some of the proponents, and I said, that doesn't make any sense. What are you really trying to do? And they said, what we're really trying to do is have more like the federal system on the same issue, which is much more structured. The state system right now is very loosey-goosey. And it turns out the federal rules, which is what Philip has included in the bill, basically are very structured, protect both sides, provide for negotiation, provide for the government to be able to audit the books to prove whether there really are price increases. So I think it makes sense.
The only other thing I would note is introduce the bill was emergency, and since this is a new process, I don't know if you want to maintain that emergency effective date or not.
Senator Griffith? Gotta use that flag.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that I was a part of the discussion on the bill, but I honestly didn't know, I was told you were going to incorporate the federal and didn't know what that meant exactly. The question I have is what kind of manpower it would take to implement these federal processes at the state level? And do we internally, as the state, have the bandwidth to do what we're asking our department to do? And what kind of fiscal impact might this have? Because this looks like some new responsibilities and research and audit type stuff, and who does that actually?
I believe it would be the agencies, but I guess, I mean, we can hold it if you want to, and we can get some reaction from the agencies, but I think basically all it does is take the existing system, which is vague and kind of loosey-goosey, which is the concern of the vendors, and creates a structure that is proven and that the vendors say works with at the federal level today. And it actually, the auditing actually makes explicit the power of the agencies to do that, which maybe they have anyway. But my own view is it protects the state well. But if you want to hold it, then.
Well, I mean, I just think it makes sense to find out.
Sure.
Logistically how it would work.
Yeah, I
Since
mean-
this wasn't a part of the hearing, I just would be.
No, I get it. That's very fair. I mean, what if we did this, Philip? Could you contact DGS and Department of Transportation, just run it by them and see if they have any concerns?
Yeah, I'll send in the reprint.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Okay. Senator McCray?
I just want to be clear that I understand it. So during this time, the RFP has went out, contract has been let to whatever contractor awarded to that respective contractor, and during that time, the prices of material went up?
Yep, that's the context.
So what happens to the contractor that may have taken that in consideration, but one contractor bid very low to try to get the job, and they just wanted to kind of do
Understand?
extras?
I understand. I mean, that's the problem in this whole area. But the current law in Maryland has that same problem, because the current law in Maryland still allows negotiation for changes in the contract based on unexpected increases, cost of material.
That's what I'm saying. I'm surprised that it wouldn't be certain contingencies already there in current law where if there is some form of a dramatic, I just think about like the bidding process.
No, I
We
get
have
it.
some that are responsible, and then we have some that try to undercut because they're betting, they're taking a bet that, hey, maybe I can make money on the extras, maybe I can make money this way on this respective contract. And then when you have a contract that's 3-5 years out, so let's say the project, like the DLS building is not gonna be built in 6-9 months. That's gonna be a several-year project. Like, how do you take those types of things in consideration? Because things are gonna fluctuate for long, big jobs.
You know more about construction than I do, but reading the language and talking with folks, this is basically focused on material costs. And the reason this is here now is obviously because of what's going on in the economy. And so there's no requirement on the government to make changes based on what you would consider normal fluctuations. This is intended to deal with the more extreme circumstances. And if we need to tighten up the language to do that, I mean, I think that would be helpful.
No, I would be interested in hearing DGS's position, but like, the situation that we're in right now is very unique. So like, this does not happen very often where you have wood quadrupling.
No, I agree.
And from a pricing, but people taking advantage of contracts do happen often, and a lot of time they get caught with their pants down because they bid too low, and they're trying to figure out how to make that up.
Absolutely. Thank you. I agree.
Senator
Thank you very much. And I think my question was answered. This seems like this is very prospective, and we don't have any information or data to know what is the extent of the problem right now, right?
Well, we do know that right now is an unusual situation, as Senator McCray said.
But I mean, can DGS show us how many times we've had this happen currently?
We can ask him.
Just wondering what experience we've had with it, because we're actually creating something for something we may not.
Well, if I may, Senator, the way I look at it, but we'll see what other people say. The way I look at it, we have a process now where if your material costs went up, you can come in and negotiate with the department. That exists now, and it's a point that Senator McCray makes. Sometimes people take advantage of it, sometimes it makes sense. Because of the dramatic increase in prices we've seen over the last year related to the supply chain problems, the folks in the industry are concerned that, not that this would happen regularly, but it could happen again, and therefore let's learn from this experience, and therefore they wanted a better system to deal with the negotiation that already takes place. The language within the bill was much too prescriptive and would have hurt the state. And that's why what we came back with is looked at the federal system. The federal system, government deals with all these issues all the time. And when you read what they do, and that's what got my attention on it, it like makes sense. It's straightforward, it's transparent, and that's essentially all this amendment's trying to do is make the existing system where there is a negotiation, people can ask for an increase, makes it more structured.
Okay, thank you very much.
Senator Young?
It's not that difficult to check. If somebody bid a contract today and a year from now prices go up or down, it's easy to check what the price was on the market at that time and the market price then. And if they underbid it, you base it off the market price, not what they claimed at the time. But actually, this thing could save us money. 2x4s, for example, are triple the price they were. They're gonna come down when things break.
Yeah, you're right.
So if they bid it on the prices today, when they build DGS, I don't know that they're gonna go back to where they were, but I'll bet you that a lot of those prices are gonna be half of what they are now. So that would save us money on a building like that when it occurs. I mean, I think it's a good bill.
Thank you.
Senator Solid?
The only reason that we know why some of the things through COVID, and this is, again, a bill just for a time frame that everything fluctuated so much by, it's an extreme, triple the price. And so that's why the federal, our federal government, our partners, was proactive in this. And they put something in place that made sense. And so we thought we were doing something at the time with the bill that we had, and then we saw that the federal government, again, we saw what they did. So we thought, okay, this is something that we need to do because they're already active. And again, the Senator Roosevelt said, we have already something in place that people bid for state jobs. It's already there. And that's, I believe they have all the answers on how we can go about this. But at the same time, we need to realize that they were not just contractors who were doing the work. They were subcontractors also working with them. And they got hurt big time. And they're hurting now. So all this bill does is try to adjust it for this period of time to make sure we can get them back on their feet. Thank you.
Okay. I think what we're doing, though, is we're gonna reaching out to DGS.
DGS, yeah, DGS and MDOT submitted testimony, so I can
Okay,
reach out to them.
very good. All right, let's try to sneak in one last one before we head over to the floor. There was no more procurement ones, right? 8:31.
So Senate Bill 831, this bill deals with education support professionals. The bill does two main things. It creates a work group that's going to study the wages of education support professionals. And then it also creates a bonus system for this category of individuals. It requires the governor to include in the fiscal '24 budget money for $1,000 bonuses for non-certified education support professionals if the governor doesn't include money for $500 bonuses in fiscal '23. There was no money in the current governor's budget for the $500 bonuses, so it should trigger a mandate for the fiscal '24 budget of a $1,000 bonus for this category of individuals. That is the bill as introduced.
Senator Zucker?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And if the committee remembers when we moved out the operating budget, we had fenced off some money for the purpose of these bonuses.
$7.2 million.
And the only other thing I'd flag is, I don't know if you have amendments in your folder, Mr. Bennett, but it's, we just wanted to make sure that the Maryland, there's three sets of amendments. One is stakeholder amendments. The Maryland State Department of Education would require each county board of education to provide information requested from the work group. And then it also makes sure that we're capturing the employees, the bus drivers that, based on the language on how it was introduced, would be leaving off some education support professionals.
Okay.
And then there's also language about the bonuses reflecting, working with Vicky Gruber and others that would capture the intent of the bill.
Okay.
Second.
As amended. Favorable as amended. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Very good. I think that's all we're going to have time for this morning. Stay tuned. See how things roll out today.
Do you have the amendments so we can send them to EHE? Can you send a reprint? EHE will want a reprint before we.
We did not. We started it last week and then had some questions. We can try to work one on the. Yeah, if anybody has anything, slip me a note on the floor.
I'm working on this maintenance of effort bill that we have to pass. I mean, every county's gonna be crying if we don't, and so I'm
Every
trying to
school
get it.
system's gonna be crying.
Yes, well, the counties pay the maintenance of effort. So, yeah, we're trying to simplify it a bit and get it done.
Doesn't current law protect the school systems? I thought it was the counties that were at risk.
It is.
It is.
Okay, the school system get the money anyway, I think, under current law.
Yeah.
Gotcha, I understand. Just trying to keep my head around it.
Yes.